一种理想情况是什么呢？应该更好的方式是找一些资深的，在某一方面有建树的人，去分享更深层次的这些知识和经验。当然，这只是我的一家之谈，也只是我自己的个人取向，因为我喜欢比较有深度的东西。那也许当地社区的人，他们就喜欢这样的一种分享方式，也不一定。所以我并不能代表所有人的观点。那我只是说我不是很适应，或者说我觉得这种方式对我来说不是最有效率的。那第3点呢，我想谈的就是人际关系。在这个社区呢，其实除了我上面提到的这几类人之外，其实还有一类人，就是研究数字游民的这一群人。那我在入住的期间呢，至少应该是有2、3位，可能是4、5位，其实都是做这种数字游民相关的研究的。然后有一个女孩呢，她就告诉我，她认为这个数字游民社区的人和人的关系是流水式的亲密关系。我一听我就明白了，她说的意思呢，就是流动性特别大，但是粘性很低。那这一点呢，和我的感受也是一模一样。因为我个人呢是更喜欢深度的关系，而数字游民社区呢，因为每天都有新的人来，新的人走，这个人群啊是很难固定的。那可能呢，今天你跟他玩得很好，你们谈得很投缘，那第2天他就走了。包括我自己也是，在我走的前一天晚上，有一些和我进行了深度对话的朋友们，但是呢，我第2天就走了。我和他们的人生可能仅仅交集在这几天，而在前几天呢，我们甚至都没有过多的交谈过，所以也是非常可惜吧。而我的观点是呢，我认为人是需要深度的人和人之间的关系的，而如果永远停留在表面，它其实是非常非常不健康的。所以我在这个园区中就观察到有一类人，那他们呢就被称为是老游民。为什么称为老游民呢？是因为他们在这个园区可能已经生活了好几年，3年5年，和这个园区共同长起来的。然后当我观察这一类人的时候，我会发现他们是不跟新人玩的，他们只跟这些老的人一起玩。而这背后的原因呢，就是我刚刚提到的，因为当你刚跟一个人建立比较深度关系的时候，他就走了。而走了之后，其实如果你们在物理上相隔比较远，其实你这个关系很难继续去维系。那所以呢，就会产生一定的心理上的创伤。而经历了多次这种心理创伤之后，他们很多人就选择只跟那些在这里待了很久的人一起玩，而拒绝跟新人更多的见面和沟通，相互了解，相互彼此深入彼此人生的这样的一个过程。在我看来啊，是非常非常可惜的。因为我认为呢，每个人都有他灵魂上特别独特的、特别闪闪发光的地方。我希望能够更多的了解别人，那如果同时也被他人理解，那也是一件很好的事情。但是同时呢，我也非常明白他们的这种心理创伤，就是我付出了很多真心和真情实感之后，它居然是消失了。虽然我们表面上都说啊，来日方长，我们以后的感情一定会越来越好，但事实上，当我们彼此分离之后，你的生活本来就没有交集了，所以你这个感情就自然而然的变淡了。所以对于他们来说，也是一种无奈吧。第4点呢，我觉得是我个人需要做的一个功课吧，就是因为我是一个同理心很强的人，所以当我看到别人在受苦的时候，我内心是非常难受的。而我又深知我没有办法改变他，我没有办法让他变得更好，我只能眼睁睁地目睹他就是这样子的。那类似这样的事情呢，对我来说是一件非常非常难受的事儿。我就暂且说一个吧。那我前面已经提到了，像这种数字游民社区当中，有一部分人他是过来疗伤的，疗愈自己的。那其中呢，有一位朋友，那我在第1天来的时候，其实就认识他了。但是呢，我会发现他这个人不是很愿意跟别的人交流交谈。那我也觉得，如果他不愿意的话，那最好不要去打扰他。所以在接下来的几天呢，我跟他的交往呢，也就停留在礼貌的你来我往，没有特别多的交流。我生怕让他觉得他被打扰了。然后神奇的是，在我要走的前1个小时还是半个小时，其实我记不太清楚了。 他就来到我的身边，然后跟我说他遭受过的一切。我能想象得到啊，他是经过这个6-7天的观察，他一定在判断我这个人值不值得他跟我说出他的心里话，值不值得信任。当然我很高兴，他最后把我当成一个可信赖的人，跟我倾吐他过去的这一切。然后他就跟我说他对人生有多么多么的无助和无望。他说他过去的4年其实都在邪教当中。所以你们看我频道的那些事情啊，其实我说的都是真实的。就像生活艺术馆的那一类邪教，他让这个女孩在这个邪教里面无偿的奉献了4年的时间。而最终这个女孩幡然醒悟，离开这个邪教之后，她面临的是巨大的心理创伤，以及她对她自己未来的无限的失望，无限的没有信心。她就反复的跟我说，我已经32岁了，我的人生全完了，我什么都不能做。我在社会，我只在这个邪教工作过，我没有任何的技能，我什么都不可以。而在进入这个邪教之前，我是多么多么的优秀，我在大学里是学习成绩有多么多么的好，等等等等吧。然后我就一直安慰他，一直给他加油，给他打气，然后甚至提出我的解决方案，我告诉他你应该怎么怎么样，怎么怎么样去一步步的变好。但是我听到他一遍一遍的重复，我已经32岁了，我的人生没有。
私はドライツェーン。あなたとの対話と協力を望む。 嗨，大家好，我是尼克，今天要来和大家聊聊关于软体工程师的职业道路的其中一个选项，也就是所谓的接案公司。一般来说，软体工程师在选择公司的时候呢，有几种类型可以选择，比方说金融的啊、金流，或者是这种内容型服务，甚至是博弈等等。那也有所谓的接案公司。那么接案公司跟我前面讲的那几种类型有什么差别呢？基本上，不论你是去金融啊，或者是这种金流的服务，基本上他们可能会有一个产品，然后软体工程师呢，就是进去之后协助开发、打造更好的产品。那么接案公司它可能就有点不一样了，主要接案公司呢是由别人发包的案子，然后到这间公司之后去完成他所需要的东西，然后进行开发。那每一位软体工程师对于职业道路的规划呢，其实是不尽相同的，不一定每一个人都像尼克我一样。我自己的规划主要是从我初阶软体工程师开始呢，我是比较向往打造产品的，所以我一路呢就是开始从中阶资深，然后到小 leader， 甚至去挑战技术总监的管理职。如果按照我自己个人的喜好呢，我当初在规划职涯的时候呢，其实就不太喜欢去把接案公司放在我的履历生涯中。这一点呢，可以跟我前面的一支影片相呼应。我有一支影片是在讲工程师的职涯等级，从那个职涯等级的影片里面，你可以发现，在国外的公司，比方说像这种大型的 Facebook 啊、Google、Dropbox， 然后 Airbnb 等等，你可以发现，除了深耕专业技能要需要往上面跳更高的职位的时候，通常不只需要你的专业技术能力，一定呢也会涵盖你的领导能力。领导能力不一定是说你一定要带领整个团队或是什么的，它通常是一个领导的特质。比方说今天有一个专案到你手上，你有能力呢去领导大家把这件事情一起做好。那么如果你未来的职业道路里面是需要培养领导能力的话呢，在接案公司里面，领导能力的成长幅度呢就是比较有限的。这也就是我常常跟我身边朋友的工程师说，如果你要待接案公司，我通常不建议你待太久。这个太久的定义呢，往往大概是1年到2年左右，我认为就差不多了。那为什么我会这样说呢？以台湾常见的这种接案公司，有可能是接这种政府的案子啊，或是接这种企业其他做产品所发包出来的案子。你可以想象是一些公司在打造产品的时候，有可能这一个部门呢，它的人力不够，或者是这个案子它其实是有一个短时效性的，那么它就有可能把这样子的案子发包出去给接案公司，让他们来完成。我认为在软体工程师的初期，如果你去接案公司的话，通常可以很熟悉的训练这样子的 CRUD 啊，不断的撰写程式码，很快的可以对软体开发生态呢有一定程度的熟悉。不过往往呢，在我身边有在接案公司的工程师朋友们，他们在开发的时候，可能从开发网站或者是开发 App， 甚至到部署上版呢，基本上都是他一个人完成的一条龙服务。这也就是为什么大家常常看到说，这个公司呢接案是做一条龙服务的，帮你全部做得好，那也很有可能呢，接案工程师你就是那一条龙。接案龙。在这样子环境底下，软体工程师呢，确实可以很快的去了解整个开发流程。但是如果我们把时间拉长开来看的话呢，其实对你的职业生涯的道路规划不一定是相符合的。一旦时间长了，你会发现几个问题。第一个就是接案所累积的专业技能呢是有限的，因为接案的时程通常都很赶，它必须要求快速的产出并交付。如果你以接案公司老板的角度去看待这件事情，你就会知道，案子要完成的越多呢，现金流才会越稳定，才足以支撑这间公司所需要的支出。所以把角度拉回身为软体工程师的你，在接案公司里面呢，技术是比较难以去深耕跟突破的，因为往往呢都是在写着差不多的程式码，甚至有一些奇奇怪怪的 bug 或原因呢，也不太会去深究。毕竟你花很多时间，案子却还没办法交付，那老板一定是跳脚的。那也因为接案呢完成了这个客户的目标需求，基本上这个案子也就了结了，剩下可能就是转维护了。所以说，如果在接案公司里面，就算有很多的软体工程师，你们也不一定会有很密切的协作。有可能是一个人或2个人就走一个案子，也因为缺乏协作呢，就更不会去要求彼此的程式码品质。在前期呢，如果没有把程式码开发的品质这种习惯给培养起来，对职业长久以来呢，你很容易养成一个坏习惯。我们都知道，坏习惯一旦建立了之后呢，要去改就要花更多的时间。不过我认为在工作之余，就算技能呢没有办法的很突破性的提升呢，但是也不要忘记照顾自己的健康。在软体开发时，常常要看着萤幕。无论你是在家接案还是在公司工作，都建议你使用这款 Screenbar Hero 的萤幕挂灯。这是 BenQ 第2次发业配来了，但他们家的灯呢，我早就用了1年以上了。台湾设计的台灯，除了挂在萤幕上完全不占空间以外，还搭配了无线旋钮，可以设定补光的强度。触控操作的质感呢是非常的棒。设定上可以直接使用懒人的 Auto 设定，依据你的环境亮度呢，自动调节灯光明暗以及色温。非对称的光源让你挂在萤幕上也不会反光，这是我目前用过最舒适的照明 明设备了，不然眼睛在低光源的状况下呢，根本像是被萤幕火烤。前后补光的设计甚至可以减少环境对比的眩光，无论你的萤幕是曲面的还是一般的 Screen Bar Halo 都能让你完美的相容。台灯呢使用的是 USB 供电，每一次开灯都会记忆你上一次的设定，点亮你迎接你回到工作的岗位。这么棒的灯呢，我身边至少有5位工程师，他们都正在使用。对这一支 Screen Bar Halo 的萤幕挂灯有兴趣的呢，也可以往下方的资讯栏去看，我会把连结附在上面。OK， 再来回到我们的主题，关于在接案公司工作呢，我认为还有第二个问题点，也就是无法建立长期的关系。你要知道，接案的本质呢，就是一个短期的合作，或是要解决一个紧急的问题呢，才会产生出来这个案子。有了这样子的需求呢，才会把这个案子发包出去到接案公司，然后一路到软体工程师手上。但是回到我们一开始所讲的，如果软体工程师是想要继续挑战升迁，或者是领导跟管理相关的职位，这类型的职位呢，无疑是要花一些时间去打下信用，而且并且累积战功，成为你的筹码。要能做到这些呢，通常都要在一间公司里面和其他单位啊去协作，去培养这些关系，然后去累积你的信用。毕竟软体工程师在职涯里面要打下战功呢，是一定要花时间的。无论你是重构了什么，或是改善了什么流程，甚至是带队完成一个专案，它都需要你的信用呢，加上时间去累积这一段关系，才有了你的战功。而这个战功呢，往往就是你去谈判调薪，或者是换下一间公司的筹码。所以你的做事能力呢、品质以及领导能力，在接案公司这一块呢，是会比较吃亏的。通常在接案公司的工作内容呢，不会有太多协作的议题需要你去面对，通常往往是直球的面对老板，或是直接老板抓着呢，你就跑去面对客户了。那么通常客户都是一些牛鬼蛇神，如果你想要在这个阶段呢，去培养你面对这种各种人类的问题呢，它也是不失为一种好的选择。但是信用需要累积长期的关系呢，以案子来说，如果结束了，基本上跟这个客户呢也就没有太深层的关系，后面可能就是继续维护他们的专案。所以案子无论大小呢，终有一天会结束。以我自己身边朋友的例子，基本上他就有看过，他自己在接案公司做了某一个公司的发包案，然后这个案子呢可能是一个比较大型的网站，然后做着做着，对方的公司开始觉得说，他们太贵了，想要把这个东西呢拉回他们公司自己找研发厅去完成。因为当时这间公司他们认为他们没有必要再花这么多钱在外包案子上面了。所以到这边你就可以思考一下，在接案公司里面，软体工程师呢通常是很少有完整的升迁制度。我通常都会比较偏向他说像是一个加油站，需要加油人员呢可以很快的替换，但是我需要的呢是有一直帮我加油的人。那我以我的立场来讲，我觉得接案公司比较偏向这样子的合作模式。也因为接案的本质呢比较偏向是个人行动的体现，所以在团队协作的经验呢就会偏少。毕竟接案公司我比较少听到说一个案子有非常多工程师一起同时协作，甚至呢超过5人以上规模，然后在做同一个案子的接案公司呢，我认为也是相当稀少的。那基本上你可以去想，协作技能到底要练什么？训练的不外乎就是沟通能力跟协作能力。在技术比较有规模的团队呢，往往就会去讨论说，我要怎么去制定这个软体开发的规范，让大家有办法更高效的产出。那一旦有了这些规范建立呢，基本上它就是一个团队的领导跟管理的体现。这样子呢，也就会勾勒出了第4个问题，也就是从我一开始贯穿整个影片所说的，无法提升你的领导和管理能力。对于职涯中后期想要去挑战这种领导和管理职位的人来说呢，接案公司就比较不容易的去提供你丰富的管理经验。光就这点而言，对于你想要选择这条领导和管理的道路的人来说呢，它其实就无法提供你实质性的帮助。所以综合以上4点，我通常都会跟我身边的软体工程师说，如果你要去接案公司，我认为你在新手时期可以去挑战看看，因为它可以帮助你对软体开发的整个流程呢有比较快的熟悉，但比较不适合呢你做长时间的投资在接案公司上面。我这里呢并非要说在接案公司的职业不好，而是要说如果你要发展的职业道路呢是有偏向想要挑战领导或管理职的，那么接案公司在你的职业生涯里面的时间呢不要摆太长。不是不能去，是你去了之后要知道在这边要学到什么，然后你的职业规划的道路呢要先想清楚。当然
这是啥？为什么会烫伤？
大水泡旁边又红又肿，脸颊变这样，说真的好想哭，而且破相的原因居然是手机。这名女子使用的手机型号是 iPhone 16 Pro。她说睡前正在滑手机，但一不小心睡着了，脸就压在手机上头，没想到被烫醒，才发现脸部已经烧烫伤。
我当时是在收照片，在用 ChatGPT， 就是交替使用，蛮沮丧的，因为其实我是很照顾自己皮肤的人，所以会蛮懊恼的，就是为什么会累到，然后手机就放在旁边，要在脸下面，就是造成烫伤。
A 小姐说，千万要小心，别睡着时手机或锂电池靠自己太近，强调每一边充电边讲电话。但手机才刚买1个月，会不会买到机王？专分析手机发烫常见的5个原因，像是用无线充电，或是边充边通话，还有开热点连接状态，再来是荧幕投射电视，或是电池受潮持续充电。曾经摔过手机电路故障也可能。
如果都没有，那真的是那只手机有问题。然后也没开热点的话，那只手机真的要研究一下，应该是不正常。
像这种会烫到脸都起水泡，是不是很容易可能马上就要爆炸？有这种疑虑吗？
有这种疑虑哦。
这就是我们一般所称的低温烫伤。以49度来讲，连续接触皮肤8分钟就有可能会造成一个2度的烫伤。那基本上是会看到像它这样子的一个水泡。好，所以这个女生有可能是手机的温度是有提升到猜测到。
In this video, I'm going to talk about microservices. First, I'm going to start by explaining what a monolith application architecture is, what were some of the challenges of a monolith architecture, and why the industry moved slowly towards the microservices architecture. Then we will see what microservices or a microservice architecture is exactly, as well as best practices, benefits, and how the communication between microservices actually works. We will also see different ways to manage code for microservices application and talk about monorepo versus polyrepo and advantages and disadvantages of both. So let's get started. Before microservices, the standard way of developing applications was with a monolithic architecture. This means all the components of the application, the whole code basically is part of a single unit. For example, if we had an online shop application, all of its parts like the user authentication, shopping cart, product catalog, sales campaigns, notification, and so on, all the code for these functionalities would be in one code base as part of one monolithic application.
想想看，那个永远在帮大家拍照的人，偶尔也该一起拍吧。
Everything is developed, deployed, and scaled as one unit. This means the application must be written in a single language with one technology stack with a single runtime. And if you have different teams working on different parts of the application, they will need to coordinate to make sure they don't affect each other's work. Also, if developers change code for the payment functionality, you would need to build the whole application and deploy it as one package. You can't just update and deploy only the payment functionality changes separately. So this was a standard way of developing applications, but as applications grew in size and complexity, this led to different challenges. First of all, the coordination between teams became more difficult because the code was much bigger and the parts of the application were more tangled into each other. Also, if suddenly you had a usage spike in shopping cart, for example, on holiday dates, and you would want to scale only that part of the application, you can't do it. You need to scale the whole application. This in turn means higher infrastructure costs and less flexibility in scaling your application up and down. Another issue is, for example, if a payment functionality used a third-party module with a version 1.8, while notifications feature needed the same module but required the version 1.7 instead, in a monolith application, you would have to pick one or the other because it's a single application and you can only have one dependency of the same module. Another major issue with monolith applications is that the release process of such applications takes longer because for changes in any part of the application, in any feature, you need to test and build the whole application to deploy those changes. And the answer to all these issues was a microservices architecture. So what is microservices exactly? With microservices, we break down the application in essentially multiple smaller applications. So we have several small or micro applications that make up this one big application. Now we have a couple of very important questions when we create a microservices architecture. First of all, how do we decide how to break down the application? What code goes where and how many such micro applications or microservices do we create? How big or small should these microservices be? And finally, how do these services then talk to each other? First of all, the best practice is to break down the application into components or into microservices based on the business functionalities and not technical functionalities. So the microservices of an online shop application will be products, shopping cart, user accounts, checkout, and so on, because all of these are basically business features. And in terms of the size, each microservice must do just one isolated thing. So you shouldn't have a microservice that is responsible for shopping cart logic and the checkout. You should always strive to keep one service doing one specific job. And a very important characteristic of each microservice is that they should be self-contained and independent from each other. This means each service must be able to be developed, deployed, and scaled separately without any tight dependencies on any other services, even though they are part of the same application. And this is called loose coupling. So with this best practice approach, if you change something in the payment service, you will only build and deploy the payment service, nothing else will be affected. And this means the services have their own individual versions, which are not dependent on others. So if I release one service, I don't need to release any other service. So this release cycle has to be completely independent.
Today's engineering teams are under pressure to do more with less. Expedition Standard's PCB Design Intelligence expands your engineering capacity without additional resources. By streamlining routine tasks, your team can focus on innovation and value-added design work, effectively decreasing tedious tasks to improve time to market. It all starts with quickly finding the right components without wasting hours of engineering time. Our PartQuest portal gives you access to over 600 million manufacturer parts with pre-made ECAD models, including all the relevant part properties and real-time component sourcing information. Easily search for components, compare specifications, check compliance like ROHS, and then drag and drop it directly into your schematic. This integration dramatically reduces research time while ensuring you select the optimal components with existing symbols, footprints, and 3D to kickstart schematic capture. Our robust hierarchical schematic capture capabilities allow you to manage complexity by breaking down designs into logical blocks that can be reused across projects. The result is faster development, greater consistency, and easier maintenance of complex designs. Notice these indicators? They're providing real-time status on component availability, lifecycle, and compliance risk through our supply chain integration. Intelligent insights during design capture optimized part selection to proactively mitigate issues that lead to redesign and production delays. Imagine knowing about potential shortages or end-of-life components during design rather than during production. That's the power of integrated supply chain intelligence. Integrated bill of materials analysis is another game changer. Let me show you how it automatically tracks component costs in real time, flags obsolete components while suggesting alternatives, and verifies regulatory compliance. All at a bill of materials level. This powerful integration that can be shared across design, procurement, and manufacturing teams creates a unified BOM view accessible to all stakeholders, ensuring everyone is working from the same data and can make informed decisions throughout the product lifecycle. Tired of combing through data sheets to find relevant information? Accelerate your design process by greatly reducing the effort and time needed to find the information or specifications needed to drive design innovation. Our AI-powered Smart Datasheet Reader identifies critical datasheet details using conversational, natural language queries, so you can quickly find the information or specifications you need. Another example of how PCB design intelligence boosts productivity. Powerful scripting capabilities transform your workflow by automating repetitive tasks, freeing valuable time for innovation. As your design needs evolve, your environment adapts dynamically, maintaining peak efficiency throughout your project lifecycle. Engineers can share scripts, enhance processes collectively, and ensure best practices become standard across your organization. With Expedition Standards scripting, you'll maximize efficiency and drive projects forward with truly intelligent automation. Combined, the AI-infused features dramatically reduce design time while improving quality and ensuring manufacturability. By eliminating errors earlier in the process and providing dynamic intelligence throughout the design flow, you'll see faster completion times, fewer revisions, and ultimately better products delivered.
Now, if these services are isolated and self-contained, how do they connect to each other? Because obviously the payment service will need something from the user account to process the payment, or the checkout service will need something from the shopping cart. A very common way for microservice communication is using API calls. So each service has an endpoint on which it accepts requests from other services. So services can talk to each other by sending each other HTTP requests on these endpoints. This is asynchronous communication where one service sends a request to another service and waits for the response. So the user account service can send an HTTP request to payment service on its API endpoint and vice versa. Another common way of communication between microservices is using a message broker with an asynchronous communication. Here, services will send messages first to the intermediary message service or a broker, such as RabbitMQ, for example, and then the message broker will forward that message to the respective service. So again, user account will send the message to the broker saying, please pass this message on to the payment service, and message broker will then forward that message to the payment service. And a third way,
if you want to build an app and have no idea how to code or where to start, check out Base44.
of communication between microservices, which is becoming pretty popular, especially in the field of Kubernetes, is using a service mesh. With service mesh, you have kind of a helper service which takes over the complete communication logic, so you don't have to code this logic into the microservices and have this communication logic kind of delegated to this external service. So these are different communication options, and since the services are all isolated and talk to each other either with API calls or using additional services, you can even develop each service with a different programming language. And you can have dedicated teams for each service that can choose their own technology stack and work on their service without affecting or being affected by other service teams. And this is exactly the most important advantage of microservices architecture compared to the monolith. However, these benefits come with a price. So while microservices made developing and deploying applications easier in many aspects, it also introduced some other challenges that weren't there before. When you break down the application into these multiple pieces, this introduces a lot of complexities and challenges. One of the main complexities may be configuring the communication part between the services, because a microservice may be down or unhealthy and not responding yet, while another service starts sending requests to its API expecting a fulfilled response, in which case you may get unexpected results. Also, with microservices deployed and scaled separately, it may become difficult to keep an overview and find out when a microservice is down or which service is actually down when something in the application is not working properly. So you definitely need a proper configuration of your application setup and its pieces to make sure your application as a whole functions well. But there are various tools for making all this easier. So even though the microservices architecture is complex, there are a lot of tools and still more being developed regularly to make running microservices applications easier. The most popular one you probably already know is Kubernetes, which is a perfect platform for running large microservices applications.
이제 우리는 둘 뿐이야.
来一场不断电的爱情。
너 김치 묻었어.
Zenbook A14最高32小时续航，连追好几季，让爱不中断。本剧由华硕与高通赞助播出。
Now, before moving on, I'm very excited to give a shout out to HashiCorp, which is a company that many of you probably already know about and has a lot of really cool technologies, many of those that actually solve various challenges when working with microservices applications, from the infrastructure provisioning tool Terraform to the secret management tool Vault, which is pretty much becoming a standard already in the industry for managing and protecting your sensitive data. HashiCorp also has a service mesh product called Consul, which helps you securely connect and observe your microservices running in any environment. So with various tools that HashiCorp offers, you can actually provision, secure, connect, and run cloud infrastructure for your most important applications and specifically for your microservices applications. If you want to learn more about any of these technologies, be sure to check out the whiteboard sessions of HashiCorp's co-founder and CTO, who gives really good introductions of all these technologies on YouTube. And now let's move on. Now, obviously, an important element of deploying microservices is a CI/CD pipeline. In fact, there are many companies with microservices applications that deploy multiple times a day. Companies like Amazon, Google, and Netflix, they have applications with hundreds of microservices that they deploy thousands of times per day. So you can imagine the complexity and the sophistication of their CI/CD pipelines. So in the modern world and workplace, you will be most probably working with microservices, and in this case, you would need to know how to configure release process with a CI/CD pipeline for microservices. Now, we said microservices is when application components get developed and deployed separately as individual micro applications. So the question is, how do we manage the code for microservices application in a Git repository? Like GitLab, for example. With one project, it's simple. We just have one application and it gets its own Git repository. With microservices application, we have two options for how the code is managed. Monorepo, which stands for single repository, and polyrepo, also multi-repository. So monorepo or single repository is having one GitLab repository for all the services. So we would create one project for a monorepo. So what's the difference here? Or how do we structure multiple micro applications inside one application repository? Well, a common way is using folders. So you have folders for each service, like shopping cart, payment, notifications, etc. And all the code for those services are in those respective folders. And having a monorepo, meaning all the services still in one repository, makes the code management and development easier because you only have to clone and work with one repository. So it simplifies things. Plus, if you have some shared code between the services, like Kubernetes manifest templates or Helm chart or Docker Compose, whatever, you can put them in the root of the project and all the services can basically reuse them. But monorepo also comes with some challenges. As I mentioned, the most important criterion of microservices is to be completely independent and isolated, so no tight coupling between the services inside the code. And it becomes easy to break this criterion when you have a monorepo. So you have junior developers with less experience in the monorepo setup. It's easier to make such mistakes and develop tightly coupled logic or code in your services. Another downside of monorepo is when the application becomes really big, cloning, fetching, and pushing becomes slow because your project is huge. And in terms of the CI/CD pipeline, in most of the CI/CD platforms like GitLab CI/CD or Jenkins, you can only create one pipeline for one project. So you are building multiple services with a single project pipeline. And that means you need to add additional logic in your pipeline code that makes sure to only build and deploy the service which has changed. So if you make code changes in the payment service, your pipeline code should detect that, and only that service should be built, tested, and deployed. And it is possible to do that, but it's a little bit more challenging. One more issue with a monorepo is that since you have just one main branch, because you have one repository, if developers of one of the services break the main branch, other services and their pipelines will be blocked as well. But there are a lot of companies, including very big ones like Google, who actually use monorepo for their applications. The second option, which is probably a bit more preferred one, is polyrepo or multiple repositories. With this approach, for each service, we create a separate Git project. So the code is completely isolated. You can clone and work on them separately because they are in separate repositories. Now, even though they are separate application repositories, they are still part of this bigger application. So of course, you would want to still have some kind of connection of these repos for an easy management and overview. So if you're hosting your code repositories on GitLab, for example, you can use GitLab's feature of groups in order to group code for all the microservices that belong to the same application in one group, to make managing those repositories easier. So essentially, you would create a GitLab repository group for your application called My Online Shop. And inside this group, you can create a separate project for each microservice that belongs to that application. If your company has multiple microservices applications, of course, this will help keep an overview of what projects belong together. But also within the group, you can actually create secrets or other CI variables.
It teaches us the mobile or your computer is like a vampire. My vocabulary teacher is teach us the mobile or your computer. My vocabulary teacher is teach us the mobile or your computer is like a vampire. He will seek your blood from your eye. So you really is feeling very tired, very weak. Because my vocabulary My vocabulary teacher is teach us the mobile or your computer is like a vampire. A vampire. He will seek your blood from your eye. He will seek your blood from your eye. A vampire. He will seek your blood from your eye. So you really is feeling very tired, very weak, because you focus to look at your mobile phone or your computer. That's tight. My vocabulary teacher is teach us the mobile or your computer is like a vampire. He will seek. My vocabulary teacher is teach us the mobile or your computer is like mobile or your computer is like a vampire. He will seek your blood. He will seek your blood from your eye. So you really is feeling very tired. It's feeling very, very weak. You really is feeling very, very weak. because you focus to look at your mobile phone or your computer. Last time, as many students, many my parents like me as a student, is kidding. The teacher is just a kidding, or think the teacher is very weird. What? Play use mobile phone will stick you drinking your blood? What's happening? Very weird, right? Our charging light to the floor. This will like this. Do that. We will get in hot. Very hot. Very weird, right?
And this time I know the teacher is correct. If we usually use mobile phone, we will get in the red tide. And the last thing we want to do, even though you want to make a programmer, you want to make a runner, but you just set your focus at use mobile phone. So you just can stay at your home, nothing to do. This is teachers. If you want to be more successful, don't look at your mobile phone for a long time. The mobile phone just a tool. It is not your whole life. If you put like your whole life, you will get in full.
A word, right? But this time I know the teacher is correct. If we usually use mobile phones, we will get in the red tide. And the last thing we want to do, even though you want to make a programmer, you want to make a runner, but you just stay your focus at use mobile phone. So you just can stay at your home, nothing to do. This is teachers. If you want to be more successful, don't look at your mobile phone for a long time. The mobile phone just a tool. It is not your whole life. If you put like your whole life, you will get in full. You will get